Good afternoon, I'm Herman Green with the Midday News. A special welcome to those of you watching on onespotmedia.com. A reminder as well that you can download our One Spot Media app from the Google Play Store or from the App Store. That's the number 1, followed by the word Spot Media. Controversial Jamaican Muslim cleric Abdullah El Faisal is facing further investigation for his alleged links to terrorism. Reports have surfaced in India that an anti-terrorist squad has discovered social media connections between 2 arrested IS operatives and El Faisal. He is said to have operatives, or rather it is said that the operatives discussed weapons, jihad and Islamic State. The details from TVJ's O'Shane Masters.
Operatives have been identified as Qasim Stimberwala, a lab technician in India, and Ubed Baisal through Facebook and WhatsApp, and were planning to move to Jamaica. Anti-terrorist squad sources said the duo's Facebook account was blocked for using radical words during their conversation with a Jamaican Muslim cleric. A squad official said India's Ministry of Home Affairs will be contacted to coordinate the Jamaican authorities for facilitating interrogation of the radical preacher based in Jamaica. The development follows a TVJ News report last month that the U.S. government has submitted to Jamaican authorities evidence it says links El Faisal to terrorism. The cleric was arrested The cleric was arrested in August on an extradition warrant. Extradition proceedings against him are scheduled to commence on December 14 in the St. Andrew Parish Court. The U.S. government has accused him of recruiting persons to join a terror group ISIS from his base in Jamaica. U.S. prosecutors say they have him on tape recruiting an undercover New York cop to join ISIS. El Faisal, a former imam in Britain, was deported to Jamaica a few years ago following his conviction for terrorism in the UK. He migrated to the UK as a youth, and it was there that he converted to Islam. O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
A bus driver is dead and another driver hospitalized following a dispute with a loaderman at the Santa Cruz No. 1 Transport Center in St. Elizabeth last night. The dead man has been identified as Brent Clark of Montego Bay, St. James. The loaderman has since been taken into custody by the Santa Cruz police. It's reported that about 9:30 p.m., the men were in the transport center when an argument over payment for loading the buses developed. It is further reported that the loaderman pulled a knife and stabbed Mr. Clark twice in the left side of his chest. He then used a handcart to hit another driver on the foot, resulting in a fracture. Both men were taken to the Black River Hospital, where Mr. Clark was pronounced dead and the other man admitted. A recommendation has come from the defense bar for mandatory teaching of plea bargaining legislation to all student attorneys at the Norman Manley Law School. Attorney at law Peter Champagny made the proposal last night while arguing that learning and using the legislation is extremely useful in the current justice climate. The Plea Negotiations and Agreement Act was passed earlier this year in Parliament. It allows accused persons to engage in negotiations with the prosecution for certain sentences upon entering guilty pleas. Mr. Champagny, while addressing a town hall meeting organized by the Justice Ministry at St. George's College, lamented that since its passage, the usage has been poor by attorneys. He believes the legislation is so valuable that it should be part of training.
I can't think of a case where it has yet been utilized, and that is sad. And against that background, the recommendation that I would make, if I can, is that this particular legislation should be a mandatory course at the Norman Manley Law School. It is very important that the lawyers that are graduating are aware of this legislation and do not fall to bad habits that some of the older lawyers have in terms of fighting everything, putting the crown to proof in all the circumstances.
Plans are still in place for the new Road Traffic Act to be passed in the House of Representatives before the end of the year. Transport Minister Mike Henry says final adjustments are being made to the legislation. Speaking yesterday at a function hosted by the Project Management Institute Jamaica chapter in Kingston, Mr. Henry said he's hoping that road fatalities will remain below 300 at the end of this year. Among the features of the new Road Traffic Act are a restriction on handheld devices and the requirement for drivers to have a license in their possession while operating a vehicle. Fines for breaches will also be increased. The Jamaica Fire Brigade is this afternoon boasting of a significant reduction in forest fires, more commonly known as in Jamaica as bushfires. This is as a result of an ongoing sensitization program the brigade has. However, the brigade says it is hoping to see a further reduction in the coming months. TVJ's Shamela Mitchell reports.
A 44% reduction in forest fires, a big jump from the figures the Jamaica Fire Brigade had a few years ago. According to Assistant Commissioner of Fire Prevention, Sean Martin, between 2004 and 2014, the brigade got a minimum of 5,000 calls to bushfires. But in 2016, that number was reduced.
From 2004 to 2014, the average number of bushfires that we would have had was anywhere between 5,900 to 6,700. But in 2016, after the introduction of the program, we would have seen the number goes down to 3,716.
Assistant Commissioner Martin says it shows that the introduction of the Community Safety and Education Program that was introduced in 2015 has been working. The program seeks to target farming communities to educate and give them alternatives to slash and burn. But there are certain areas of concern.
In St. Andrew, there are a number of concerned areas that we have, because even though we would have seen a significant reduction in the number of fires in the Mavis Bank area, it is still a concern, not because we're having fires, but because we have to try to maintain that presence and try to keep the sensitization going so that the citizens can be on the lookout and continue to do their risk assessment in the Stony Hill area. That is also an area of concern where we normally see a number of bushfires.
Meanwhile, Assistant Commissioner Martin says between now and January next year, the brigade will have to heighten its awareness to prepare farmers for their next crop.
We know come February, March is really the planting season and the preparation season for land. So we try to do the intervention as a proactive approach to resensitize the farmers so that they think twice about using slash and burn, and they basically go for more conventional methods of farming. Like they basically cut the land and they use the vegetation to do mulching, which actually reduce the input of fertilizer into the yield crop, and still getting good yields from that.
Shamela Mitchell, TVJ News.
Climate change and recovery strategies are major areas of concern to be addressed at this year's United Nations World Trade Organization UNWTO Global Conference, slated to take place this month in Montego Bay, St. James. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett said day one of the conference will be dedicated to the future of tourism in the Caribbean, focusing on climate change and exploring recovery strategies in the wake of the impact of Hurricanes Irma and Maria on states in the region. Minister Bartlett gave an update on the conference at a media briefing held in Montego Bay Chamber of Commerce on Tuesday. The minister is also expecting that through this conference, Jamaica will cement its place as a global conference destination and strengthen the country's competitiveness in gastronomy tourism.
This whole exercise in gastronomy is going to go beyond and much beyond the presentation of Jamaican foods. It is going to have impact in terms of the agricultural production in Jamaica. It's going to have implications in terms of how we use some of the commodities that we grow now, which hitherto we were competitive on the world market with, but we're no longer competitive.
The minister said the conference will redefine Destination Jamaica as a center where the world can come on an annual basis to celebrate on matters relating to the development of tourism. The Agriculture Ministry says it's still pushing to fulfill its mission of seeing Jamaica produce enough surplus in all agricultural areas, leading to exports and an increase in the national gross domestic product, GDP. However, Agriculture Minister Carl Samuda says it's a challenge because there are many players who are involved in agricultural production for export, while at the same time not being able to satisfy the domestic market. He was speaking at the recent launch of the 14th annual Eat Jamaica Month in St. Andrew. Eat Jamaican Month 2017 will be observed during November, and activities for the month will be held in partnership with
whether the ministry had developed strategies, policies, and interventions to prevent and control diabetes, and the extent to which it had implemented systems to figure out whether